Hey, this is Matthew with Another World Terraria. Welcome to part 4 of my tutorial series on how to grow immersed Bucephalandra like a boss. In this video, I'm going to go over water, light, and temperature. By the way, if you haven't seen the previous videos in this series, go ahead and watch those before this one. I have a playlist you can check out. First, let's talk about watering and misting. Type of water. I use distilled water for all of my plants. Although it's relatively expensive, the cost is worth the benefits, which I'll go over in a moment. I buy distilled water in gallon jugs at local grocery stores. I've never used reverse osmosis water, also known as RO, but that would also be a good option. Distilled and reverse osmosis water are excellent because they don't contain any chemicals, additives, or contaminants, and they have a negligible total dissolved solids, or TDS. The benefits of having such pure water are that there's nothing that could harm the plants in the short term or long term, and that it doesn't leave any residue, minerals, stains, etc. on any containers or substrate. Amount and frequency of watering. I add water into my bins up to about the top level of the substrate, or sometimes slightly below. Then I let the water slowly evaporate. The substrate in the plants never dry out too much, but I do let the water level fall a bit, and then refill it back up again with an occasional long and heavy misting, creating a cycle of high and low water table. The length of time between watering varies from bin to bin based on the amount of ventilation, the size of the bin, how deep the substrate is, and so on. I do light mistings a bit more often, giving the plants a quick spray to increase humidity and keep the foliage healthy, especially when the bin has more ventilation. Next, let's talk about lighting. Quick disclaimer, I currently have no interest in the technical aspects of lighting, and so I don't usually use light meters, and I don't worry about things like PAR, which stands for photosynthetically active radiation. If you want to get super serious and methodical, feel free to learn about all of that and buy expensive meters and so forth, but I think it's totally unnecessary. I like to keep things simple and take a much more pragmatic approach. That said, here is some of the info about the lights that I use for my Buce. Light bulb type. I use LED bulbs for all of my plants. The type of bulbs vary, but for most of my Buce, I use a variety of cheap LED bars which are designed as under-cabinet lighting. They're easy to install, modular, lightweight, cost-effective, and generally are a good intensity for Buce. There are hundreds of options and brands on Amazon, which is where I get mine. Light color temperature. I always use white lights with a Kelvin range of 5500K to 6500K because I prefer the natural sunlight-like appearance. I don't use lights that are skewed heavily with pink, purple, red, blue, etc. because I find them unattractive and totally unnecessary for my purposes. Light intensity. Buce can grow in very dim light and in fact seem to be healthiest and look their best when the light isn't too bright. Being in the shadows really helps bring out the metallic sheen. The cabinet lighting bars I buy are usually about 300 to 400 lumens each, and I put my plants about 12 inches to 16 inches below the lights. As mentioned, I don't usually take light readings of any kind, but recently a friend asked me to check my Buce light intensity so he could get at least some idea of what I'm doing. He requested that I try a light meter app for my phone, so I installed one called Light Meter Pro on my iPhone and gave it a whirl. The app measures something called lux via the phone's camera light meter. I would not consider phone light meter readings to be super reliable, and I wouldn't base critical decisions on the data, but it can't hurt to look at the readings to get a baseline idea of what's going on. What I found is that most of my Buce are in light which reads about 250 to 400 lux. Adjusting light intensity. Sometimes you're going to need to make adjustments to the intensity of the light. Here are a few ways to do that. You can increase or decrease the number of lights. You can increase or decrease the distance from the light to the plants. You can use reflectors around the bin to increase light. And you can use diffusers on top of the bin to decrease the light. Here's a quick pro tip. A really great diffuser is fiberglass window screen. It's cheap, easy to work with, and multiple layers can be stacked to cut down light incrementally. Light duration. In horticulture, the light duration, also known as the photo period, is the amount of time that the plants are receiving light for growth. For all of my plants, I use a photo period about 14 hours long. I use digital timers so everything is automatic. Temperature. I grow all of my plants at whatever temperature it is in my home, aka room temperature. I'd say on average that the ambient room temps are somewhere between 69 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit most of the year, depending on the time of day or night. The temps inside the bins are slightly higher. During the summer, the temps can be in the 80s Fahrenheit. I try to run air conditioning when it's really hot so the temps don't get too high. A friend of mine lives in Australia and he has quite hot temperatures there. He noted that in hotter temperatures it can be beneficial to do more frequent and regular misting and or fogging to keep the plants cooler and happier. That's congruent with my practice of increasing ventilation and misting more often during the summer months.